Good morning, everyone. Last weekend was a terrible weekend for Paris, and I'm coming from Israel, and we are somewhat familiar with the terror, unfortunately. And there is only one thing or two things that I would like to say. Number one, help all the victims and the victims' family, and number two, never give up. Okay, if you don't show to this event, if you do something, you actually let them win, and they should never win. So never give up. With that, I would like to switch into, taking you into a journey of entrepreneurship and disruption. And let me start by asking who in the audience is using Waze? Raise your hand. Okay, so in France, there are 15 million people using Waze that helps them to avoid traffic jams every day. And as an entrepreneur, if you can create something that creates a lot of value to a lot of people and people are using on a regular basis, then there is no bigger reward than that. So entrepreneurship usually starts with a very strong feeling, either love or hate for something that leads into dreaming and then passion for that. In that particular case, I hate traffic jams. I really hate traffic jams. I hate wasting time. And traffic jams is definitely one of the areas that you waste a lot of time. And after there is you start to build a passion for that. You start to realize that there is a need to sacrifice, and you understand that you're going to sacrifice a lot of things. And building a startup is a roller coaster. It goes up and down and continuously doing that. And at the same time, for an entrepreneur, there is no doubt what's next. If you'll ask an entrepreneur what you're going to do after this startup, it's always the next startup. And actually, if you'll ask them, okay, this next startup of yours, what it's going to be all about, they actually know what it's all about. So we started Waze 2007, and by 2009, I already knew what's my next startup going to do. So to a certain extent, entrepreneurship in general, this is exactly like falling in love. So imagine yourself that you're looking into a lot of ideas that you would like to implement, or you date many girls, and eventually you fall in love with one idea. And it takes a little bit of time, and then you basically say, okay, now I'm going to tell my friends about this idea, or you take your date out to meet your friends. And when they tell you that this is the stupid idea that I ever heard, and believe me, a lot of people told me that, then you actually disengage from your friends. Or if they tell you that she's not for you, you disengage from your friends. To a certain extent, fall in love with the problem you're solving, not the solution. And if you are in love, then there is nothing that's going to hold you back. The first year when you start a new startup, there are a few things that you actually need to focus on. So one of them is, of course, the mission. And the mission is solving a problem that is worth solving. Otherwise it doesn't worth it, right? So find a big problem that it's worth solving. But at the same time, remember that you're also starting not just this journey, but also starting a new startup, right? A new working place. And the DNA that you will set for this working place will actually determine eventually if this is going to be the journey of your lifetime or not. Focus is not about what we are doing. It's about what we are not doing. These are the hard choices. These are the hard decisions. So a startup, in order to be successful, need to do only one thing right. The rest, in order to do this one thing right, you actually need to ignore everything else. And even though that there might be a lot of opportunity along the way, you should be focusing on solving the problem and creating value. And the journey itself is long, and in particular, the longest part of it is the one that says lack of traction. So this is like crossing a desert, right? You are in the middle of the desert and there is only sand around you, and you walk all day, and at the end of the day it still looks exactly the same, and you don't even notice that you're making progress. But you actually do. And this is a long period of time. Now, if the mission is right and the DNA of the team that you have built is right, then you would go through the hardship of the lack of traction. If the mission is not right, or if the team is not right, then most likely you will fail while you are in the middle of the desert. just realization of the journey. At the end of the day, building a startup is a journey of failures, not of success. The end result is success, but you actually try something and it doesn't work, and then you try something else and it doesn't work, and then you try something completely different and it doesn't work, and eventually, by trying many things, you eventually find the one thing that works, and then you go into the next phase to duplicate that. And so the journey itself is a journey of failures. If you are afraid to fail, the reality is that you already failed, because you are not taking the risk, you are not willing to make tries that maybe are going to fail. And the reality is that most of them will fail. Sometimes you ask yourself whether or not you have a good idea or a big idea, and ask yourself very simple questions. If I'm successful, who will be out of business? How the market will change when I'm successful? And if you don't know to answer that, then it's not a big enough idea. And part of the journey is a lot of celebrations, right? You celebrate everything. You celebrate the first of everything. First time that, first user, first version, first time that someone writes on the paper a new, first employee, first office, first everything. And these are pretty good, but much better if the system crashes because of overloading, or if someone is suing you for patent infringement, or you actually experience fraud, right? In this particular case, this is very, very relevant, right? So fraud is a good reason to celebrate. That means that someone already identified that there is an opportunity in what you're doing. And I'm not saying that you shouldn't prevent that, but not upfront. What you should be doing is let the fraud happen and then go and fix that. The best thing is when you have people thank you that you helped them. And I think that the biggest reward that I had with Waze when actually people come to me and say that I actually saved their marriage, because now they don't need to ask for direction, and their wife are not telling them that you should be asking for direction. So it turns out to be very useful, and I turn out to be a marriage consultant as well with Waze. So the startup journey in general is very simple. We are looking for a problem, and then we are looking for the users and their perception of the problem, and only then we can build a solution for that. And if we do it in this order, then we eventually solving a real problem. Now, once we do that, we can start to duplicate that. Once we figure out that the solution actually creates the value and solve the problem, we can go ahead and duplicate that. So the Waze journey, and maybe the magic behind Waze, it's very interesting, because when we started, that was actually the map of Israel, or that was the map of Paris, or that was the map of everywhere, blank page. And the reality is that what happened is that we collected from the devices themselves, from the handheld device, the GPS data. And if we will take this data and draw that on the picture, it would look something like that. So it would look like a trace of dots. And if we take that from a lot of people, it's starting to look like a map, right? So if I will tell you that in the middle this is a traffic circle, it looks like a traffic circle, and it is a traffic circle. By the way, this is a center Tel Aviv area. And if you see an area that looks much more dense than our area, that will be, main road versus arterial road. And if there is an intersection that no one is making a left turn, then we know that no left turn is allowed. And if there is a road that there are 100 people going into one direction and there is no one else coming the other direction, that will be one-way street. And turns out that if there is a road that 100 people going into one direction and there are only 5 coming the other direction, that turns out to be one-way street in Tel Aviv. So this is how we drive, and if you ever come to Tel Aviv and drive there, take that into consideration. And so the system actually built a map out of that. And then we enable map editing tools that allows other users to provide us with street names and house numbers and additional information that makes the map nearly complete. And at this point of time, if we will have someone that drives slow all of a sudden, then we can realize that there is a traffic jam. And once we have a lot of people like that, then we have a complete picture of where traffic jams are, and we can help people to avoid traffic jams. We can help people to tell them exactly how long it's going to take them to get there, and so forth. So this is the magic of Waze. Now, obviously, on top of that, there are additional information like speed cams and reports that are coming from active participation of the user. If that really works, what we are about to see here is actually a video that shows how the map has been created in a few places in Eastern Europe. You can see the date, beginning of 2010, and this is where Waze become globally available. And it will zoom in into the center area, but in general, it took about 6 months in this place for the map to become good enough. Now remember, Waze is a free application. If you're free and good enough, you win the market, period. This is nearly guaranteed. Good enough and free wins every time. And it doesn't matter if there are other or better solutions. If you're free and good enough, you win. Took about, again, 6 months for the map to be created in multiple places. And by the way, if you drive someplace that no one drove before, then your avatar will change into a roller steamer, and you actually pave the road as you drive. And once you do that, as soon as you drive, then this road is then available for other drivers that are using the same application in the same area. And so this is the magic. The map is being created by the users, and so is the traffic information, and crowdsource is the trick of Waze. Now, obviously, it took, telling the journey. We launched in Israel beginning of 2009. We actually started the company in 2008, but we started the journey before that. We teamed up and decided that this is what we're going to do in 2007, and it took us about half a year to start the company, and only then we started the development and raised funds and so forth. In beginning of 2009, we launched in Israel, and then end of 2009, we launched globally. And it took a long period of time. So at the beginning, everyone is exciting, and it turns out that it's working beautifully in Israel. But when we launched, we realized that, remember the lack of traction period? That doing that globally is much harder. And it took us about a year, entire 2010, to figure out what exactly we are not doing right. And it took us, anyone here is using Waze since or before 2010 or from 2010? If you'll try to use Waze back then it will give you routes that don't make sense. And you would basically give up on using that. Now, obviously, today it works beautifully because we have reached a point of critical mass and we have solved all the issues that we have. But at the beginning, it didn't seem like working. And only in 2011 we started to figure out, and we have seen, places that we reach critical mass like Los Angeles and San Francisco and Atlanta and Washington, D.C. So metropolitan areas in the U.S. and in Europe we had Netherlands and Italy and Sweden and then France and then Spain and more countries. And this is what we have seen globally. Multiple places, one after the other, we reach critical mass and then we win the market. In 2012, Waze was actually growing faster than the entire industry together. So if you take all the TomToms and Garmins and all the navigation apps and everything that was offered by mobile operators, globally, Waze was actually growing faster. And June 2013, Waze was acquired by Google for a little bit over $1 billion. And for me, that was clear indication that I need to move forward and go into my next journey. I actually literally left the day after. So recapping a few things here. Building a startup, we are actually looking for 3 things: the users, the problem, and only then building the solution for that. And we are looking for the journey itself is finding something that works. So we try multiple things until we find one thing that works, and then we are switching into let's replicate that. And this is another journey by itself, because you try to replicate it and you try one thing and it doesn't work, you try different things and it doesn't work, and then eventually you figure out how to replicate it. And then you move into the next journey, which is growth and so forth. If you are building a startup, these are probably the most important tips that I can share with you. If you want, you can call them the sum of all of my failures. And the first one is understand who the users are and what's their perception of the problem. In many cases, we think of ourselves as an example, and we are excellent example of one person. That's it. And if you really want to understand the perception of the problem, then you need to speak with other users and other people that you tend to believe that they are your users. And then you'll figure out whether or not they're relevant or whether or not you have a good perception of the problem. Making the mistakes fast. Remember that free and good enough wins every time. So the biggest enemy of good enough is perfect. If you try to build something that is perfect, someone else is going to be good enough and wins the market. And what the reality is that what you should be doing in order to actually move faster is making the mistakes faster, right? If you're building an app and you're not sure whether or not this is ready, it was ready long time ago, right? Go into the market and get their feedback so you would know what to fix. To a certain extent, believe that product development actually starts after you launch. Beforehand, you're building a prototype, right? You're building your own dreams of your own perception of what the problem is. Only once you launch, you can start to collect feedbacks from users and figure out exactly what needs to be done. So product development starts after you launch. The DNA and the mission actually defines your journey. And it's going to be a hard journey, right? It's a long roller coaster journey. Make sure that you enjoy that. Fall in love with the problem and not the solution. As long as the problem is out there, it's worthwhile to go and solve that. If the problem disappears for multiple reasons, then no one cares anymore. In focus, the main thing is to keep the main thing the main thing. And this is very hard, right? Figuring out exactly not what is the main thing, but actually not doing anything else besides that. Part of the journey is that you will figure out that you need a fuel for your car in order to go in this journey, right? So you will need funding. And a few months ago, I went into one of the VCs in Israel, and I met with one of the partners and asked the guy, how long does it take you to decide if you like the entrepreneur or not? And so he was looking at me and asked me, okay, do you want the right answers or do you want the real answers? And I said, I heard the right answer so many times. I prefer the real one for a change. And then he told me, before they sit down. So the reality is that the first impression takes seconds. And it might be 5 or 10 or 20 seconds. And then we have very few minutes to maybe change that. And even though that we tend to believe that we are all rational people and we are, thinking of the decisions that we are making, the reality is that we are making decisions from here. We all emotional, and we make emotional decisions. And then we use the rationale to explain why these decisions are actually rational. And so if this is the case, then you need to start your storytelling with the strongest point at the beginning, because they would lose attention very fast, and they would make up their mind in minutes. And therefore, if you don't start with the strongest point at the beginning, maybe you'll never get to that. And maybe it's too late. Maybe no one cares anymore. So you start with the strongest point at the beginning. Realize that investors in general, they are users too. So if you will, if an investor would think that I'm not going to use that, the likelihood that they will invest is very, very small. And so therefore, you need to tell them a story that will link them into what you're doing, that will create the emotional engagement with them. And even if you know that they're not the users, make sure that they start to think of someone that will be the users, because if they don't, they're not going to invest. Learn how to tell a story. This is critical. If you don't know how to tell a story, then you will never be able to raise funds. Even if you're right, even if the market is huge and you have excellent team and everything is worthwhile, but if you don't tell a story and if you don't create emotional engagement through the story, very likely that they will not invest. And then obviously, if this is a VC, then the only thing that they care about in the story is how big the market is. And you finish up with the strongest point at the end. It shouldn't be more than 2 or 3 minutes to tell this entire story. And it takes a long while to practice it. So disruption, very interesting point of view of disruption. And here we are in the middle of disruption of many payment methods, and many parts of the industry are going to be disrupted. But it's not about technology. Technology is the enabler. Disruption happens when we can introduce new product that does not exist into the market, or if we change the price, right? Just imagine that the disruption of Waze was traffic product and free, right? Two things that we have changed at the same time, and therefore we won. Maybe you change the model, right? Anything that people used to buy up until now you actually rent them. So you change the business model, and because of that, you create disruption in the market. Or you shift the knowledge, right? So what if people beforehand don't know, and now they do know? So essentially, disruption is about changing the market equilibrium. And changes could be dramatic, and could mean that existing players in the market will disappear, and could mean that new players will enter into this market, or could mean that some of the existing market, the balance between the market leaders and the followers will change. The change is in the market equilibrium. Disruptors in general, they are always newcomers. There are always new players, right? So existing vendor in a market cannot disrupt the market. They have too much to lose. And essentially what's hidden underneath that is that in order to disrupt, what you need to say is that the way that we are doing business today is wrong. Now, if you're coming from the outside, you can say that. If you are inside, what it also means is that the way that I am doing business is wrong. And no one wants to believe that this is wrong. So disruptors will always come from the outside. And this is, when we disrupted the market of navigation and map making and traffic at Waze, the discussions that we had at the beginning with players in the market were, okay, it will never work. And a year later, maybe it will work, but it will never be good enough. And a year later, it was, okay, maybe it will work, but not in the main markets, or not in Western Europe and not in the US. And a year later, they come and say, okay, how can we cooperate? But it was already too late. So think about it as an existing vendor, you don't see it's coming because you have a hard time to believe that it's possible. What it means, if you want to believe that this is possible, is that the way that you're doing business is wrong. And, markets that are calling for disruptions, if there is asymmetric information in the market, if vendors know and consumers don't know, this is calling for disruption, right? If there are middlemen or information broker, it's a market calling for disruption. If the value that is being created is dramatically lower than the price that people are paying, this is calling for disruption. People would realize that. And in each one of them, I can show you how the market can be disrupted. If someone will do something completely different, right? If someone, I'll give a few examples in a second. In my role, I tend to upset people. I tend to upset a lot of industries. And because, I try to support the consumers. And by doing that, obviously, I sometimes take away the free lunch of the vendors, and they don't like that. So let me just say a few words about myself. So I'm a disruptor and an entrepreneur, and I deal only with consumers. And I try to create a lot of value to a lot of people in multiple industries. And, a lot of value would mean if I can save you time, if I can save you money, if I can empower you. And let me give you a few examples. By the way, I start about 2 or 3 new startups every year. So Waze, we're already familiar with that. Move It is like Waze, but for public transportation. So really answering the key questions, how do I get from here to wherever I want to go using public transportation right now? It turns out that Move It is actually following the footsteps of Waze, but faster, and becoming global leader, and already have 30 million users globally, and simply moving faster than Waze at the time. FeeX is Robin Hood of fees and deals with maybe the biggest secret in the world, financial fees. There are $600 billion of financial fees every year in the US, $600 billion. This is more than the entire entertainment industry, right? This is Israel is a small place, so this is more than double the GDP of Israel. And people don't know how much they're paying. And when I was a child, my dad told me that if you don't know how much you're paying too much. Now, this is true in all the industry, right? If you don't know how much you're paying too much. And so FEX is about figuring out how much fees you're paying in money, not in basis point, not in percentage, and how much it's going to accumulate until you retire or in the next period of time, and how to reduce that. And we are starting to make an impact in the US, and obviously financial institutions don't like me anymore. But the reality is that the biggest issue in this market is that people don't know, which means lack of transparency. Rumor is a marketplace for non-refundable hotel reservation. So just imagine the situation that you're making travel plans and you make hotel reservation, and then life happens and you change your plans and you get stuck with a hotel reservation that you're not going to use. So simply sell the reservation and recover some of the losses. Now, the feeling when it happens is that you actually take good money and throw that to the garbage, and no one likes that. Zik is another marketplace. It's actually a marketplace for store credit. So imagine yourself returning something to the store and getting a store credit that you can only use within the store or within the chain. It turns out that 30% of those store credits are never being used. So they are expired, they are lost, you go to the store and they are at home, something bad happened to them. These 30% is $100 billion. $100 billion of breakage, of loss every year. So Zik is a mobile instant marketplace. Simply you look at it, you scan the store credit that you have, you upload that for sale, and someone else will buy that. NG deals with the frustrations of going to the mechanic. So if I will be going to the mechanic with my car and they will tell me that I need to replace the carburetor in my car, I will say, go ahead and do that because I don't know anything. Now, the reality is that they don't make cars with carburetors in the last 2 decades. But we wouldn't know, right? When you go there, you're completely helpless. And so NG is an app running on your smartphones, connects to the car computer, doing the diagnostics for you, and then asking for quotation to repair that. And all of a sudden empowering the users, not just knowing what's wrong, but also comparing prices, because today you cannot compare prices in this industry. Fairfly deals with the biggest secret in the travel industry, which is what happened to the airfare after you book your flight. So we all compare prices before, right? And if you watch the prices, you will see that they are going up and down. And at a certain point of time, we make the booking. But we never check the price after that. Now, the reality is that the price keep on going up and down after that, but we don't know. So Fairfly monitor your own itinerary after you make the booking. And as soon as the price drops, and drops below the cancellation fees, then it alerts you that right now you're leaving money on the table. In one click, rebook the same flight or rebook an alternative flight. So imagine that you're flying from here to New York, right? So you can fly Air France, or you can fly Delta, or you can fly American or United. It doesn't really matter. They are all going to travel about the same amount of time, and they are all offering pretty much the same service. I don't care. When I bought the ticket, I actually made a purchase decision based on what was available at the time of the booking. What is available after that, I don't know because I don't check. So Fairfly does that for you. And this is a model for disruption that I'm going to feed all of these startups into that. And it's a very interesting model. The important part is that it's always start with emotional feeling of the user about the problem. So what does the user feel about? And when you can define that, you can actually later on build a traction that allows you to become market leader. The next one will be how big the market is. So if the market is small, no one cares. But if the market is big, then it's pretty unique. Then the disruption, and the disruption is how we are going to do business differently, how the market will change if we are successful. Most of the cases, there is a single trick that actually change everything. So just imagine Uber, for example, and I know that Uber is not available here in Paris yet. But what they've created is new market equilibrium because there are many more drivers that are offering more trips. And the reality is that the result is that there are more trips for everyone. People are using that more frequent. And so the trick was a marketplace for travel, for trips. And then eventually the impact. What would be the impact on the market? So take Waze, for example. Everyone hates traffic jam, but also we were able to create a common enemy. So, we the drivers, all of us the drivers together, are fighting traffic jams and speed traps together. The market size, there are approximately 1 billion cars, and obviously this is big enough. The disruption was because it was free in a new product that was not available on the market, which was, bypassing traffic information. The trick is crowdsourced, so everything at Waze was created through crowdsource. And then the impact, I would say, go and ask existing player in the market or previously existing player in the market what was the impact in their perspective. They nearly all disappeared. If we look at Move It, pretty much the same deal, right? The crowdsource is the trick. The disruption is that they can launch everywhere because of the crowdsource method that they have. So they are global and you can use that everywhere. And the impact is that eventually you control, everything about where people are going, and no one else does. If we look at FX, then people are helpless and they are overpaying when it comes to financial institutions, when it comes to retirement plan, when it comes to long-term saving, when it comes to brokerage accounts, people don't know how much they are paying. In the US, there are $600 billion of fees now. I haven't looked into the French market, but I assume it's pretty big as well. The disruption is that we create transparency in the market and we offer that as a free service. And once you do that, you actually shift the power from the financial institutions, from the vendors into the consumers, and you change everything. The trick, again, is crowdsource, and eventually it will create new market equilibrium. Now, Fix, I left Waze the day after the acquisition in order to start Fix. And obviously the company is still young and we haven't made the impact yet, but it's definitely on the right way of making that. Rumor, this is interesting. Rumor is a marketplace. Marketplace in general do not disrupt. It's actually create more use of the same things in the market. So if you look at in other markets, what did Uber, what happens to taxi driver when Uber was introduced? Actually, they have more business today than before. So most of the marketplaces are actually creating more use of the available resources in the market and therefore increase the likelihood of everyone to win. So in general, increase utilization. Zik is the same thing, increase utilization and actually create branded money, right? If you are a store, then you have store credit or gift cards, and Zik create liquidity for that, then you're going to issue more and sell more of your branded money or branded currency. NG, NG launched in Israel, and the gaps between the differences between different mechanics that they offer to repair the service is coming to 30 to 40%. Now, we don't know that because we cannot compare prices. But the disruption that NG creates transparency and price comparison. And as soon as you do that, then you eventually lower the price by about 30 to 40% because people, if these are the same parts and the work is becoming pretty insignificant, then obviously people would go to a less expensive mechanics than to the more expensive mechanics. If they don't get a better service or a better product, then they would buy cheaper. And Fairfly, it's pretty frustrating to sit on an airplane and ask the person next to you how much did you pay for the same seat and find out that they paid less. And it's even more frustrating to find out that they paid less not before you made your reservation, but they actually made the reservation after that and paid less. And the disruption is, again, price transparency. And in many cases, if you can create price transparency, if you can create transparency in the market, you change many things. So, with that, I would like to send you home with a homework. Find a big problem that it's worth solving, and go ahead and solve that. Don't be afraid to fail, and make an impact, right? Make a better world for all of us here. Thank you.
Thank you, Yuri. Yuri will be available at the Innovation TV on the other building if you want to discuss a little bit more with him. So I took notes. I think I will be able to do a second ways or something else.
Excellent.
I hope you took notes as well. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Thank you very much. Back also to our reality and to our numbers. So every year I'm thinking, what could I say that will be new or what will be disruptive? And every year we have tremendous things to discuss. And this year, again, I will discuss with the next speaker tremendous number and fantastic trends. So I'm really happy to welcome on stage Timothée Mangenot, the new chairman of the Eurosmart. Good morning, Timothée.
Good morning, Jean-Noël.
How are you doing?
Very well, thank you. How are you?
Good. Yeah, fine as well. Thank you very much. Happy to see you on a good shape. So maybe you can start and explain us what's going on the smart industry this year.
So a lot is going on. Actually, the smart security industry is growing again in 2015, reaching the mark of 9 billion secure elements shipped worldwide. In 2016, we see again a growth of 6.6% that confirm the good trend of the sector of the last years. Every market are going up, so the telecom market is steadily growing to 5.45 billion SIM cards shipped in the world. Financial services are riding on the US and China EMV migration. They will be soon followed by other markets like India. And this represents 25% growth compared to last year to reach 2.6 billion payment cards shipped in the world. Government and healthcare is as well positive. We saw almost 8% growth for this year, and we foresee more than 10% next year. Finally, the market that is enjoying the highest growth is the device manufacturer segment, which delivers 63% growth in 2015, so compared to last year. This is mainly due on the usage of embedded secure element inside the mobile phone for mobile payment and transport.
So, Timothée, I'm tracking number every day. So 63% seems enormous regarding embedded security element. Are you sure about that?
Yes, we are. So mobile payment is paying with your mobile phone at the point of sale by waving it on the contactless terminal is coming. Thanks to the Apple Pay, Samsung Pay, and other OEM payment solutions, they are changing mobile payment by bringing in critical mass of adopters, or at least by enabling critical mass of adopters. The best consumer experience with a high level of security works very well, and we saw Apple last year announce 1 million users in the first 72 hours of launching Apple Pay in the US. So the enthusiasm is coming from the ease of use and the trust. And trust is also about security. So using a secure element inside the mobile phone to store the payment application is delivering a high level of security, limiting fraud. This is the same security and the same principle that you have currently in your payment card. What is important here is that security is not against consumer adoption, and to the contrary, it contributes to trust. Security must be strong enough so that the user doesn't have to care about it or know how it's done.
Okay, so you refer again to phone, mobile, and sorry to disturb you, Timothée, but can we imagine other services with this embedded security element?
Yes, so the use of embedded secure element inside mobile phone could be used as well to offer other services requiring the highest level of security. E-government is a very good example of that. Mobile ID, mobile health, e-voting, and all the new services offered by Government 2.0 are based on secure digital identity. ID credentials are very valuable. They are hard to revoke, hard to replace, and they must be securely stored in a very strong secure element. So if the secure element is inside the phone, then you can prove your ID or your rights using your mobile phone, accessing to government services. This will increase the user experience, enhance the user experience, increase usage, so everybody wins in this. The states will win as well because it will allow efficiency gains and reduction of fraud.
Are you really sure? Is this realistic, honestly? Because I heard a lot, and I'm tracking again these kind of trends. I'm not sure about what you are saying. Can you please help us to understand, for example, here in Europe, what can we expect from these services?
So first of all, the European Union is very active on the topic of digital identity. In July 2014, a regulation called eIDAS has been adopted, creating a legal definition for electronic identification and authentication for the 500 million European citizens. The standard and technical rules are partially adopted, and there is still some cooperation required between the member states, especially on the mutual recognition of those services. So a lot will happen in the coming years, and those times are truly exciting.
Okay, it seems that you are discussing regulation again, but maybe you can go further and explain what will be the impact in our daily life.
Okay, so I will take again the European Union as an example. So the EU is focusing a lot on promoting the digital single market. The idea is to make the European single market fit for the digital age by tearing down regulatory walls and to move from 28 national markets to one single one. The Commission expects that this will contribute 415 billion euros to the European economy every year and create hundreds of thousands of jobs. So you may believe it or not, but it's a good news that the regulator is focusing on our area of interest. Now, will they come with a smart regulation is another story, and this is where Eurosmart enters into play. The role of Eurosmart and the smart security industry is to propose regulation to the Commission and to the European regulators in order to make sure that the digital single market is based on solid trust foundation, the trust of the consumer and the trust of the citizen.
Okay, that's fine. So we discuss payment, we discuss mobile ID, mobile health, and where the embedded security could have a really huge impact. We are tracking other verticals, and big data and IoT, Internet of Things, are really hot topics at the moment. Can we imagine this embedded security element have an impact on this market?
Yeah, it is a very good topic. IoT is spreading a lot. It's not here everywhere, but it will soon be. Smart home, smart kitchen, smart metering, everything is becoming smarter. Our life is translated into bits and bytes, and in most cases for the better. But the same rule applies here. Security is essential. There are two topics of relevance for the smart security industry. It's security and privacy. So it means the protection and the protection of the confidentiality and the integrity of personal data that are used by the connected device. It also concerns the authentication credentials that are used to connect to a smart object, or that a smart object is using to connect. So you would not want a non-authorized guest to get access or control over your smart device, your connected car, your smart meter, or the camera roll of your phone. So the access must be handled with care, and the right security level must be applied. Will IoT exist without security? Of course, but we believe that that security should be embedded at the beginning, as it's patching things up after the fact is always more difficult and not as effective.
Thank you, Timothée. You provided a lot of numbers. I'm not sure everyone can repeat again these numbers, so maybe just to summarize what you just said, can you do a few words, and can you say a few words as a conclusion?
Yes, so we have touched several markets, IoT, e-government and mobile payment, and they are all in their early days of mass adoption. They are all very promising, and the smart security industry is contributing to those segments and to many others by providing product, solutions, skills, and expertise when security and privacy matters, and they matter a lot. So one key message is that security is not against convenience and adoption. To the contrary, it inspires trust, and then will allow adoption everywhere. The connected society where we live in, we continue to grow because we trust, the consumer, the citizen, the corporation, the states, trust it with our data, so trust is there important as well. We are at the beginning of a new promising journey with a great potential for the smart security industry. I'm personally very pleased to be part of this industry, as you're probably all of you are since you're attending the show today. Thank you very much.
Okay, thank you very much. As I mentioned previously, we will have now 4 speakers. So prior to introduce the first one, I would like to quickly focus on one vertical which is really relevant this year. I'm referring to payment. You heard that we have crazy numbers. And as Yuri said, and what I'm using sometimes when I'm describing the payment ecosystem, I said that payment is not having an evolution. Payment is inside a revolution. You have disruptive companies everywhere looking to find new services, looking to promote new solutions. I'm really happy to welcome on stage Kazem Aminaee, President and CEO of Spire Payments, and he will discuss the past and the future of payment. Kazem.
Good morning. Thanks, General, for the kind words. I must say it's an honor to be part of the opening summit of TRUSTECH 2015. I would like to first start my presentation with a couple of searching questions. How will the payment landscape will evolve in the next 10 to 15 years? If it does change, what are the challenges? And in fact, why does it need to change? Having personally been involved in the payment industry in the past 20 years, those questions are not new. They have been asked many times, and the answers have always resulted in a very low, slow-moving landscape, and many times with the false starts. I can easily recall many attempts of bringing new ideas, new technologies to the payment. A couple of examples. Biometric fingerprint recognition in the mid-late 90s, when the time was to introduce chip and PIN cards, and the problem was for those cards which are not PIN-based transactions, how can people remember the PIN? So let's introduce fingerprint. We also had the history of electronic purse, replacing cash with different standards, Visa Cash, Mondex, Proton, and a lot of others. I also remember the e-commerce online payment issues when the internet came with the mid-90s, and you had the proliferations of online shops and online shoppers, but there was no standard to make the payment. I must say that there's one common theme for all of those evolutions. They all failed. Or let's say better said, it took decades to make changes in the payment industry. So if you want to be in the payment, you need to be patient. They all failed, I would say, summarized in 3 parts. One is, I think they did not deliver any perceived value to the cardholders and later to the merchants. There were competing standards. They were confusing people and inhibited adoptions. And finally, solutions relied on technologies which either they were not available or they were in their infancy. I think moving forwards, the evolution of payment must be built on capitalizing and delivering value to those in value chain while capitalizing on two things: the e-commerce infrastructure and the smart connected devices. On a positive note, what technology have been successful in the past 20 years? There is one contender, that was chip and pin EMV. And to some extent, I would say contactless cards. If you look at EMV, initiated in '95, the need was clear, the technology was available, and even that, it took 20 years before we see even half of world's debit credit card being EMV. And most shocking, the home market of card schemes, US, is just in the process of adopting the technology. The EMV adoption in the US has been slowed down in the debit, mainly by Durbin Act. Now this is behind us. At that time, a lot of people would say the EMV will never happen in the US, and they will go straight to host card evaluation and tokenization, something that I'll touch base later. But as of today, we can say that 1/3 of the cards and possibly less than 25% of the installed base have been migrated to EMV. There's Citibank, Bank of America are ahead, probably 50% of their cards, but there are other banks much behind. And some people even say that the EMV migration in the US will be accompanied with the contactless cards at the same time. So that's enough about the past. Let's focus on the future. Although the payment landscape has not evolved in the past 20 years significantly, the dynamics have recently changed. The dynamics have changed with the arrival of digital giants, Apple, Samsung, Google. And there's also the new phenomenon that there are 2 billion smart cards. But are they going to change significantly in the next 3-5 years? Are they going to drive the standards? Let's take it from another angle. The growth in electronic payment will be driven by cash-to-card conversion, cash-to-digital conversion, and card-to-digital conversion. It is anticipated, estimated, that 2/3 of the growth will come from conversion to digital, and 1/3 will come from cash-to-card conversion. Card payment will continue to grow, even if digital. There is about 500 million of people not having access to any cards payment. So that will be the financial inclusion of those people will drive the growth. But the most important part is digital payment. In the digital payment, there have been a lot of new ideas, new technologies, and that creates sometimes confusion. You have multiple e-wallets, PayPal, Google, even Square, Starbucks, a lot of MNOs have their own wallet. We touch based on Apple Pay, Samsung Pay, and Android Pay. You have the mobile payment NFC, and you have the HCE tokenization. And finally, you still have biometric, fingerprint, iris, face recognition, and most importantly, there is a notion of cardholder on device CVM, which is on our road. All of these above points are based on one philosophy, one concept, that every device becomes a commerce device. Let's take a few examples of those. One thing happening today is the MPOS. MPOS is giving the capability to the merchant that don't accept the cards to use their own smartphone to make payment. And you can make a payment using such a small device. And it's estimated there are just in Europe a couple of millions of merchants not having any card payment capabilities. The infrastructure is there, the requirement is there, the technology is there, and it's well on track to evolve in the payment space. Second is mobile payment NFC. NFC has been introduced based on a standard that we all know ISO 14443. The technology exists, the standard exists, and it took years. I think it was 2007. Now we are 8 years after, and we don't see a lot of NFC payments. It's obviously driven by, there's no problem of standards. The requirement is there. You can use your mobile phone to pay. It's basically the fact that financial institutions need to agree with telco that this becomes a commerce device. And also the cost of getting a telephone, a smartphone being certified, once you are called Samsung and you bring every 2 months a new phone, and the time that you need to spend, it's enormous. That explains why NFC promises are not yet there. The most disruptive technology, and that's everybody is working on, is host card emulation tokenization. So it's whether it's going to be based on secure element or based on purely cloud-based software, or it could be a combination of both. But HCE tokenization it's so disruptive that will change completely the landscape. There are going to be a lot of players that we don't know today that will play a role in the value chain of tokenization. And obviously it creates it creates some concern for financial institutions, but also it drives the growth. It creates also some concern because of the security aspect of HCE tokenization. This is the first time that payment space has truly capitalized on convergence of technologies, something that happened in the telecom industry long ago. It is the first step in the new journey of payment driven by mobile smartphone, by mobile devices. The ability of these platforms to communicate anywhere, anytime on multiple networks has allowed payment to become accessible and acceptable. This philosophy is also echoed in our strapline: transaction, interaction, convergence. Now, looking forward to Horizon, the vision becomes more foggy. Technologies such as digital currencies, blockchain, artificial intelligence could well play a role in the payment landscape. But are we falling in the same trap as in the past? Can the network and infrastructure reliably and securely support a voice command to your smartphone, ordering your favorite pizza, delivered to your friends, and paid in advance? Our imagination exceeds our infrastructure capabilities. As we can see also from the number of mobile phone calls that drops. But without imagination, there is no progress. So the dream of today will make the reality of tomorrow, and once again, the past will meet the present and shape the future. Thank you.
Okay, Kazem, I have a question. And maybe you have quite the same question as me, because you discuss a lot of technologies, a lot of solutions, a lot of services, etc. Kazem, if you were to predict only one payment solution which will succeed in the future, what would that be and why?
The question is something that everybody is sick to answer, I believe. Firstly, there will not be one solution. Secondly, people around the world are different and have different relationship with the money and with their finance. And it varies based on their culture, their income, their history, and I would say the country's political context as well. There will be many solutions. There will be many solutions, but I think the one which will succeed needs to have at least these 5. It needs to be intuitive, ubiquitous, secure, transportable, global, and fun. As my daughter says, cool. You can pay with your smartphone. And even if you pay your money to somebody, it needs to be fun. And I can say that there are a lot of things going to happen in the payment space. I'm just pleased to be lucky, to be in the most exciting period of the payment industry's history, where a lot of things will happen, and Spire Payment is present to help shape the future.
Okay, thank you for your conclusion. I'm quite sure you already provided many ideas to Yuri for the next startup you will create for payment, for sure.
Sure.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
So, as you just heard, payment is an exciting vertical. And we are facing new regulation, new consumer digital expectations, new technological disruptions. But we need also to provide much more value to the payment transactions. So I'm really pleased now to welcome on stage Gilles Grapinet, who is the CEO of Worldline.
Hello, everyone. Glad to be with you. Thank you for welcoming me here in this very important event in very special times, as we all know. Anyway, life must go on, and I'm really happy to share with you some thoughts about our exciting payment industry times. Worldline, for those who are not knowing us, is the largest payment solution provider in Europe and one of the largest payment processors in the world. We just announced, actually last week, a major transaction with our colleagues from Equens in the north of Europe that will join forces with us within the enlarged Worldline group. And I'm extremely happy to share with you the reason of this move, of course, and to talk about my topic of today, which is how we should look forward as the exciting times of transformation of the payment world through the digital revolution that you mentioned, Jean-Noël.
Okay. So maybe as a starter, I will ask the first question. What definition can you give to digital in payment?
Well, actually, you know, that is just something that amazed me. I was listening to Yuri. I mean, if I do believe listening to what banks are sharing with us, we have more than 200 banks, customers of the company across the world, big merchants that are also sharing with us their views on their evolution, the need to invest. So many people are talking of problems, you know, problems linked with the digital transformation. Banks, of course, feeling the pressure of the new regulation, which is so heavily weighing on them, asking themselves what they should do in the mobile payment space. Should they invest in connected devices and connected technologies? Merchants having also the same questions. What type of payment means will be successful at the point of sale? Where should they invest themselves? What will be supporting the business? Well, if I'm just listening to the problems, actually, the good news is that we have many problems to fall in love with. Actually, it could even look like polygamy, if I was really to build that. But the point being that I do genuinely believe that this is a land of opportunities. And I would like just maybe to start by, because for this no-slide presentation, I would like just you to follow me. So first, I would like to start by a definition. I would say the Worldline definition of what digital means for the payment world. Mm-hmm. And I think it is much more than just changing the form factor of payment, or much more than just bringing traditional stuff through a new distribution channel like the smartphone. Then I would like to share with you some illustrations of what we do, because it has actually started this journey of digital transformation in payments. And third, just based on experience, maybe also share some convictions on execution, because the vision is nice, the technology is great, but ultimately it was your capability to execute on the technology. So just the definition, as per you requested. What it is, as per our experience today, bringing digital to payments. So for us, it is very simple. It is actually being able to take advantage of 4 major breakthroughs allowed by technology layers. Let's forget the technology, whether you call it cloud data lakes, whether you call it semantic analytics. It doesn't really matter. It is just there. It is affordable and it is doable. What can you do with it? First, digital is about extended and improved connectivity. 5G, pervasiveness of connected devices everywhere, fundamentally tells one thing. You can capture data from everywhere, anytime. That's for sure. Let's think that way. Second, it is about what we call contextual data analytics. It is not only capturing one data, it is knowing everything about the context in which this data is captured, as long as, of course, cardholders or merchants or automotive manufacturers will allow you to capture the context. Third, it is real time. This is maybe the most important one. Everything will happen in real time. The payment industry is actually primarily an offline world. So the real-time challenge is just gigantic. And fourth, it is about fundamentally what we would call bi-directional mass communication. My ability as a brand to communicate in real time with millions of customers, citizens, passengers, name them. You can actually get in touch with everyone as they can get in touch with you. 4, change of paradigm. Extended connectivity, real-time contextual data analytics, and bidirectional mass communication. With that in hand, you can truly tell that you're gonna make payments digital.
Okay, it's clear for me, but maybe to be a little bit more precise, can you give us a concrete example of that?
Well, I would start first by looking at, that was really great to have the Yuri on stage at the start, because it is just, I think, the way we should think in the payment industry. Payments is part of our lives since eons. We've been having cash, coins, checks, then cards, debit, credit cards, now mobile, internet-based payments. It is just the life. We are all using payment means. But at the same time, look at the way disruptive companies are engaging into any verticals and actually applying these 4 changes of paradigms I was just describing, the way they totally reconstruct a value proposition. I think we should first look at them and then transpose that into the world of payments, because ultimately it is exactly that. It is about solving an old problem with a new approach. So if you know, I think all of us here, we are now familiar with the GAFA type of acronyms, the Google, Amazon, Facebooks, and the likes. The new one of 2015 seems to be, it is a buzzword, it is NATOs for Netflix, Tesla, Uber, and this type of company that have actually taken an existing vertical sector industry and they've been applying a new way to solve this old problem. The GAFAs did not do that. The GAFAs, they entered into a space where nobody was doing a search engine. Nobody was actually doing recommendation engines. They created the Facebook concept out of nowhere. But the NATOs, they take a vertical and they just reconstruct it. So it is exactly the way they do that we should apply to our payment world. It is really our strong belief and strong advice to our customers. It is about being obsessed by the value proposition. Let's forget the technology. Let's talk about the business value for your customers, the merchants, the banks. That's there. Then being obsessed by the customer experience. It was so clear in Yuri's presentation that the customer is at the center of everything. And it is about knowing everything about this customer, and he accepts you to know everything because he knows that in return, he gets a phenomenal experience. It is just this obsession of the customer at the point of sale, the customer with the bank that should drive us. So it drives me, of course, to be absolutely convinced that we should transpose for banks as issuers or acquirers or for merchants the same type of methodology and technology is what we do, of course. It is the start of the journey, but we have very concrete examples of what we can do there.
Okay, so naturally, my next question is regarding this value proposition. And what are the opportunities that you can expect to expand to main stakeholders, so issuers, banks, merchants, retailers?
Sure. Let's start maybe by banks, because of course these days banks feel being a bit besieged by all the pressure they are receiving from the regulation, and I need to recognize that these are challenging times, because you take an old business model with the interchange, you decrease the price, all of a sudden it will happen in Europe, as everyone knows, probably at the 9th of December 2015, which is really tomorrow that the decrease of interchange will be enforced everywhere. And it is such a hit on the P&L and the equilibrium of the P&L of issuers that, of course, there is a massive rush to adapt themselves to this pressure. But it is not only that, the regulation. It is the direct access to the banking account provided by the DSP2, which will allow third parties basically to access to one of the best kept secrets, the status of your banking account, of course, provided as a banking customer, you allow that to happen. And it is so many other things that are putting pressure on banks. So what banks must do, fundamentally, these days? First, they look at the P&L and they try to improve their P&L. They are just extremely rational, as every one of us. So they look where are the costs first, and where is the top line, and how can I improve, actually, the top line and decrease the cost. So regarding the cost, there is a big one that needs to be tackled through digital technology, which is definitely fraud. One of the big area of losses and costs for any issuer is the cost of fraud. And the cost of fraud is exploding, as we know, due to the evolution of internet and mobile payments. So there, if you believe to apply Worldline, for example, technologies, but I have some good colleagues here in this show that will certainly also share the same approaches, what you can do with real-time consumer behavior analysis to diagnose immediately in real time that this consumer is not the one he pretends to be, because just there is a breach in the way he behaves usually and versus what you are just monitoring. What you can do around real-time authentication services, particularly if we move to instant payments, where it won't be only about instant clearing and settlement, it will be also about adapting the back office's processes to instant authentication of the customers. All that is actually bringing us to think that we need to reinforce very significantly the layers of fraud management and fraud management tools into the banking and processing environment when we process on behalf of banks. A second enormous area of reservoir and a reservoir of wealth for banks is the untapped market potential. Kazem was mentioning the MPOS. I'm totally supportive of that. The MPOS is much more than just a tool, a new tool, or just the ability to take a mobile phone to accept cards. If you look at it, it is just a type of phenomenal icebreaker to engage into untapped market niches that were not equipped. It is for banks as acquirers. It is also for us as the payment processors, a gigantic pool of business that was just let aside because the previous business model was not requiring us to penetrate, and we did not have a solution that was affordable. So it is just this type of approach that banks are now developing. And as a good example is peer-to-peer payment. Let's talk about an old traditional problem that has not been well solved. It is peer-to-peer payment. In most of the countries in Europe, you don't have a convenient way to send money through your phone or through internet to a relative, someone, a friend, a family member. It is just it is not populating. Some startups are trying, but they lack the penetration that banks may have. I'm not going to disclose the projects that we are currently executing, but many banks have understood that you can provide a very powerful nationwide peer-to-peer payment system for free in exchange of data capture and the creation of new relationships with customers that are not your traditional banking customers. And this is the type of dynamism that digital is bringing to this market. The last one, maybe the most important one, is the value that banks are having today within their databases regarding the data they are capturing on the payment transaction, and they do nothing with it at this point in time, most of them. They just start to explore the value of the data they capture when they process the payments of their customers. They know so much. It is just like a gold mine, an oil field that can be absolutely exploited to create also new business value proposition to merchants that are also eager to know more about their customers, and banks can bring them a lot. So it is the type of proposition that Worldline has been developing with many banks. We call it the Worldline Cash Club. Doesn't matter the name. The concept is very simple, helping the banks to monetize the gigantic pool of data they've been creating over time on their customers, of course, as long as it will bring value to their customers when they go retail. This is fundamentally the type of things we are absolutely seeing developing, and I think it is the right answers from the banks to adapt themselves. Being bold and looking at the digital transformation more as an opportunity, more than a threat.
Okay, with my question, I included also merchants. Maybe you can go further, specifically on this.
Yeah,
on
sure,
these people.
sure. For merchants, I mean, merchants are like every one of us. I mean, we are just running companies, all of us. We're just obsessed by growing our top line, and we want our customer to be loyal to the brand. So for the merchants in payment these days, the big elements that we see populating our own activities with large retailers are actually threefold. The first one is, how can I improve through retailers' wallets, payment wallets, the customer journey and the customer experience, whether it is in physical stores or by converging my online propositions plus my network of physical store. It is phenomenal what you can do if you properly articulate the value proposition, because then traditional retailers that have been suffering a lot from the digital champions that came into their field over the last 10 years can now retaliate. They can glue together two value propositions in one: a strong physical network with a lot of benefits for the customers, plus the value of digital properly articulated into the customer journeys through, of course, retailers' wallets with payment in the middle. To solve what type of very old problem? Let's talk about problem as Yuri was doing. What is the typical problem in the physical retail space? It is that payment is still a friction. It is one of the most valueless friction that you have as a customer. You shop, that's nice. You pick up the goods that you want, that's still nice, or take the service, and then you go queuing. And after queuing, you get access to the payment terminal. And this is valueless for you. It is even an opportunity for you to change your mind and to just drop the stuff that you've been convinced by the sales guy to pick up, because you start comparing price over internet. Making payment frictionless, we call it in Worldline zero-effort payment, is absolutely mandatory. And it is there that if you properly glue in a given retailer's wallet a strong payment embedded capability, but also with other type of functionalities like geolocalization, interactive real-time marketing, of course, system for ordering in-shop or being delivered at home or directly at the back of the shop, all that can create a totally different experience. You don't need to queue, you don't need to waste your time, you just enjoy the best of the experience with this brand. I can just give you a concrete illustration that is not sci-fi, is what Worldline has been doing, for example, for a very well-known brand, McDonald's. McDonald's, we've been developing for them a very powerful value proposition to solve the queuing problem at peak hours. 80% of the volumes are sold between noon and 2 p.m., creating, of course, a bad customer experience. So it is about having a mobile app allowing you to order remotely, to be proposed immediately your traditional usual menu if you want. It is really one-click ordering, one-click prepayment. You prepay, you show up at the restaurant, VIP line, you bypass the queue, you are delivered. It is now going to evolve to be delivered on the parking directly to your car to exploit the drive capabilities of the Worldline network. This type of value proposition is great. We have also been selected by the Accor Group, hospitality brand, to develop their new Accor wallet, which will allow us, as customers of the brand, to receive constantly in real time the best value proposition in terms of rates for booking, to prepay at the time of the booking, to embed your ID or passport encrypted securely into the wallet, so you can bypass the check-in in all the countries where you need to go and where you are requested to show your ID as per the local laws, so it can be sent directly to the desk. So you bypass the check-in, you go to your room, you can open the door of the room with the smartphone with the encrypted key that you receive at the time you show. You just get access to your room, and you can pre-personalize what you want into the room, including having the meal already delivered if you are certain of your time of arrival. Checkout time, you know, all the guys like myself at 8 a.m. rushing to the checkout and having 10 guys, and I'm going to miss my taxi and miss my meeting. Forget that. Check out as you go. You don't show to the desk. You just pay, including your extras. That is a powerful value proposition in all fairness. Frictionless payment. So it is the future, and it is what Worldline is absolutely delighted to work for. And it is really for us the reason to go to the next step and to bring now scale at the European level.
Yes, thank you, Gilles. Really concrete example. Maybe now, what about the execution of these changes?
Well, actually, digital transformation, as you understand, I hope, and as my predecessors were saying, is much more than just bringing a piece of technology into existing infrastructures, by far. It is first about the strategy of a company. So it is having really in a given company a strong empowerment given by CEOs, CXOs to support this transformation. It is about transforming the business, no doubt. We, as partners, can support, but it is really transforming the business. So first and foremost, it is an obvious advice. Make sure that it is really supported at the highest level of organization. If not, believe me, technology is a costly distraction for a corporate organization. If it is not connected to the business, it is just waste of money. And so fundamentally, if this condition of execution is met, then it is picking the right partners. I will preach for my church here. It is not any change, the one we are facing in these times. It is a race. It has actually started. New entrants are there already. Market shares are challenged. So it is a matter of time to market and strong execution. There pick the right partners because it is a so serious change versus traditional business approaches that you need to make sure that at execution time, you will not fail. You will not fail. Making the decision is tough. Identifying the business value proposition is tough. Only the customer can do that. But then you need to execute absolutely smoothly. This is there that it has to happen, and why I really do seriously believe that in Europe particularly, I'm just talking of Europe, we lack scale. It is the reason for Worldline of having been listed last year to get funding from markets, and we are extremely happy of the support we've been receiving from the financial markets, and to allow us to pursue the consolidation of this industry in Europe. If I compare to the US are having the dollar for 2 centuries. They are having a common regulation for the last 40 years in payments. And they have companies that are 5-6 times bigger than the largest the largest European one, which happens to be Worldline. So if I take the euro, we got the euro since 15 years. We've got a common regulation over the last years. Actually, it is just starting to be implemented. We need also companies in the range of 6 to 10 billion euros to bring to banks and merchants the benefit of the European scale. It is exactly the reason of the merger and the fact that we joined forces with Equens, which is also one of the largest payment processors in the north of Europe. They will join Worldline to exactly bring scale, innovation, and R&D capabilities at the European scale to our customers.
Okay.
Thanks.
Thank you very much.
Thank you so much.
So you understood that maybe the payment will be for free. Why not? Yuri, if you can help me in this to start a new startup company. And maybe the new gold mine will be data. And we heard since this morning that data, your data, etc. I'm quite sure there is something to do. In order to do this, we need also to have components, because we discussed 2 specific verticals, which are payments, and they are really, really, really important at the moment. But we have also many other areas where we can dig. Big data, IoT, and I just referred to personal data. I'm really pleased to welcome Stefan Hofschen, CEO Chipcard Division at Infineon Technologies, and he will discuss the security of this.
Yeah, thank you, Jean-Noël. It's good to be here, as good as it could be at these days, but at least I'm very pleased that a lot of you are here and that we can have this discussion here. Yeah, you said already, I want to talk a little bit about security in the connected world and the IoT specifically, which is a little bit switching gears compared to the payments we discussed before. And I want to start with a little example. So I'm pretty sure all of you have at home your PC software at the latest stage, so no old software, I assume. And then, of course, you have protected your home Wi-Fi network by password, I assume, and you have downloaded the latest update of your virus scan. So usually, I think it looks like everything is set and everything is secure. But what would you think, what is the next security loophole you have in your home? Well, I brought one with me. It's very small. It could be this one. So that's an LED light bulb, wireless connected. And in fact, it was a loophole a year ago because in order to do their job, these LED lamps need to exchange the wireless LAN passwords amongst each other. And they do that encrypted, and they use keys for doing that. But unfortunately, all these keys were not properly protected, and so these lamps were leaking the passwords. Well, of course, those guys have fixed that then quickly, the specific loophole, but it shows very impressive how much the connectivity is opening new threats in the whole infrastructure. And what is even more impressive, that now you cannot just think about how much security to need to protect this device, because this is not the decisive question. A light bulb is nothing which needs a lot of protection. The decisive question is what kind of threats it is opening if you connect that to your network. So this is just one example regarding IoT and the security of the connected world, and I will come to some other things at the end. But let's first of all talk about the IoT in general. The value of IoT is, of course, not coming from the things being connected. We heard that already. The value at the end comes from the data, the transfer of data, and then even more important, out of the analytics of these data. People analyze these data, and by analyzing these data, they can offer new services. And these new services, they offer convenience for the users. They can make your life easier, as I said, more convenient. And as Yuri said, that's the most important thing, that you have something which is attractive for consumers. At the same time, also for enterprises, it's offering new opportunities because they can offer new businesses and new services to B2B customers as well. So the same there. But there is one very important thing. There need to be trust in these services. If there is no trust in these services will not materialize. Even if the value is high, they will not materialize. Just imagine you want to introduce a new remote maintenance system for a production facility. Your customer, who should be connected to the system, he will ask you if this remote access is secure and if it's protected against hacking. And if you do not have a good answer for that, he will simply refuse to connect his factory. And then your whole business model is not going to fly. So trust is important in all these services. And as usually, security is one of the important measures to introduce trust. And that's why in this whole IoT discussion, from our perspective, security is a top priority. And we should, of course, treat it like that.
Okay. We just discussed a few minutes ago, and it was again regarding payment, and we discussed different trends, and we were referring to HCE, or card emulation. So mostly software, even if we discuss also about tokenization. It appears at the moment, as I'm tracking a lot, many industries, that people are looking for pure software solution in order to provide security. You at Infineon, you are providing hardware security. Can we do everything in terms of security with software?
Well, I mean, software plays a very important role, of course, as hardware does. The tricky thing with the IoT, it's not about software versus hardware. It's, from our perspective, software and hardware. You need to define a good security architecture, And this architecture comprises of software and hardware, and you need to find the optimum way to make it efficient on the one side and effective on the other side. And there on the hardware side, we all know that hardware has some clear advantages if it comes to something like key storage, or if you want to protect your algorithms. And so there are some clear advantages. The IoT revealed some other advantages, because in many cases in these devices it's even more easy to implement a strong security scheme if you use hardware, or you can to a certain extent avoid problems in your supply chain by adding hardware. So hardware has some advantages, and we strongly believe that hardware security will play an important role. All our payments cards has hardware inside, so it's not a question about the value of the device, and I think the IoT will not be much different. But again, it's not about hardware versus software; it's hardware and software, and it needs to come together.
So back to IoT, back to Internet of Things, because you discuss software and security and hardware and software security in general. Back to this, is it realistic to already think about security in IoT, or is it a futuristic vision?
No, I think it's very realistic. If we think about the IoT today, already in 2014, 1 billion IoT devices has been shipped. Half of it were consumer devices for entertainment and communication. The other half was car subsystem, automation, manufacturing subsystem, all these kind of things. In 2019, it's expected to be 6 million pieces shipped, or 6 million devices being shipped per year. So the IoT is there. This is very clear. This is out of discussion. And now if you look for examples like that, or if you just read the newspaper and the increasing amount, for example, of car hacking reports, you see that in this case, at the same time where the IoT is evolving and picking up, at the same time also the threats are already picking up and the fraud is already there. And in contrary maybe to the traditional payment industry, which we heard several times, is developing to a certain extent slowly. It took many years. The IoT is driven by other dynamics, by other consumer market dynamics, so it will evolve quickly. And as we see, at the same time, the security questions are evolving. So also the security threat is already there, and we do quite a lot of things to work on that, which is maybe one thing I would like to talk about. The question is, what are the challenges now? And we heard a little bit about that already. Of course, authentication is a big challenge. We know that authenticating people is important, but in this case, authenticating objects is as important. We need to know who is connected and who is talking there. Then we need to make sure that the data is protected against misuse and spying. So that's usually an encryption problem. And last but not least, we need to make sure that the IoT system itself is not manipulated, because if we put a lot of knowledge in there on how to bring a good security architecture in, we need to be sure that it's fully functional, even if it's then outside in the field. So protecting against manipulation is the third thing. And then in realizing that, of course, all these IoT markets are very different. If we are talking about cars, for example, or critical infrastructure like power plants, it's not difficult to imagine that they have a very high requirement on security. On the other side, there is maybe your fitness tracker, which is maybe more on the lower end. And what we need to do, we need to provide very specific solutions to these verticals and to these markets which fit the needs. And then there are, of course, coming some other aspects on top. Many of these device makers, they are not security experts per se, and most likely they do not even want to get. So they need products and solutions, which is a bit in contrary to former times from our perspective, which are more or less ready to use and very easy to implement. So they do not want from us to buy a chip and say, okay, I buy the chip and then I implement security. They want to buy security at the end, and they want an easy path to integrate the security into their system. So this is new, and then I think there's another challenge, not only for us but for the entire industry, because security is always an end-to-end game. It needs to work along the entire chain, otherwise it's not working, and not one player can do that all. So what we need to do, and where we are focusing a lot on, is to create more partnerships, to work with partners together, to create these kind of end-to-end solutions, because that will at the end be what the customers will ask for in the different market. And there are first products available. We have security products in cars. We have products which can secure a home gateway like in Google On Hub or some of these things. So these are already specifically designed for the needs and the security needs of a certain vertical. And as I said, we are convinced that hardware security, of course in combination with software, will play a crucial role there to achieve the right level of security. And that's why we are making a lot of efforts, because we believe if we cannot manage that, the whole IoT and connected world scenario will not be successful at the end.
Okay. Thank you for your presentation. Just one final question maybe from me. I will not ask you, as I asked already, what will be the future payment solution, but maybe a more open question. What is your 2020 vision? A futuristic question.
Good question. As Yuri said, there need to be a mission. So our mission is, at the end, we want to bring security to the connected world. And of course, if I would have a wish for 2020, then it would be great if this thinking on security and the security architecture is an integral part of every IoT system design, because there are a lot of them where you can just not afford to fail. So you need to think about that from the beginning and need to bring that in. And if we would come to that point that it is an automatic part, that would be great. And that would be great not only because that's of course an interesting business for us. We are also coming from the perspective that today, if people start to use these devices, they have a lot of concerns. And they are mindful of all the different threats which could appear. And if we use all the technology we have already and transfer them into that space, we can be able to create some trust and to offer them some peace of mind. At least in this aspect, we just learned that there are other aspects which we cannot solve, but at least in this aspect, we can offer them some peace of mind. And if we are able to manage to do so, then I think that would be a great achievement in 2020.
Okay. Thank you very much, Stefan.
Thank you
very much. So as I said, we will have 4 speakers. We already discussed 2 verticals. We discussed component. And now I would like to discuss what, according to me, represent the core activity of our market, provide a secure identity and to grant a secure transaction. I'm really pleased to welcome on stage Todd Wilkinson, President and CEO of Entrust Datacard.
Good morning, everyone. Thank you for having me here today. It's great to be with you. Great to be here in Paris. I am Todd Wilkinson. I'm the President and Chief Executive Officer of Entrust Datacard, and it's exciting for me to be here and to present to all of you, especially alongside of the group of esteemed executives that we've heard from already this morning. For those of you who are unfamiliar with Entrust Datacard, Datacard has been in existence since 1969, and we are a company that has a long history and legacy of many of the technologies that are used every day for the issuance of payment cards and financial cards on a global basis. 2 years ago, we acquired Entrust, a leader in digital security. And last year, we rebranded ourselves as Entrust Datacard, merging together two companies, one with deep domain expertise in digital security, one with a long-lasting history in identity and payments applications. I'll talk a little bit more about how we're evolving later in my comments, but I see a distinct parallelism between our evolution and what even we see here at CARTES and TRUSTECH, which is the evolution of this show, which began many years ago focused on chip card technologies and today is expanding to discuss and include the broad range of technologies around security and trust. So it's a fantastic transformation to keep our show relevant, and I think it's a fantastic time to be here with you all. I think as we stand here today, I would be remiss if I did not mention the fact that certainly we are all greatly aware of the tragedy that struck Paris in the last few days. And as we come together from all over the world, I've got a team here with Entrust Datacard that literally represents probably 30 countries. And as we come together from all over the world, I think it's an opportune time for us to think about the theme of this show, and it should resonate with us perhaps a bit more, security and trust. So let's think about what that means. All of you to arrive here today had to use some form of identity, whether a passport, a national ID, driver's license, perhaps you even used a mobile boarding pass to get on a plane to arrive here. And on your journey here, you all used some form of payment credential to book a hotel, to make a payment at a point of sale. And then I can see that most of you are connected to your networks back at home. As we speak right now, most of you on your mobile devices. And the common thread across all three of those examples is your identity. Your identity is precious to you. It allows you to travel, to pay for things, and to do business from anywhere that you are in the world. Your identity is more precious to you today than it has ever been in our history. And as we all know, our identities are not just precious to us. They are very valuable to those who seek to steal them. So identity security is becoming more and more to the forefront. The vulnerabilities we have in our identities today are significant, and the way that we use them makes them perhaps even more vulnerable. We are shifting continuously today between digital transactions and physical transactions, and the identities that we carry today were not built for that purpose. And the concept of our identity is changing. But the good news is much of the discussion and many of the comments you heard from the prior speakers really resonate around how do we better secure our identities and ultimately our transactions. Not long ago, when we talked about identities, we thought about a physical identity. The examples I used earlier, a passport, a national ID, a driver's license. All of these forms of identity were created in a world that really required direct physical contact. These approaches have worked for many, many years, but the way that we live our lives is stressing this approach. And these digital forms of identity were not created or designed for the digital interactions that we are involved in today, and they weren't built to meet today's security threats, and certainly not the security threats that we see coming. On top of all of this, our world is not stable. It's becoming even more complex every day. We just heard a presentation speaking about the Internet of Things. With Internet of Things and the move toward cloud, what is an identity is becoming an even more complex discussion. The identity of the light bulb that was here on the stage. Identity is becoming a more complex discussion, and this trend is not moving to reduce any complexity. Even the traditional payments discussion that we would have here at the show is becoming more complex. As we move from cash to payment cards to paying for things on our mobile devices, the complexity in our payments ecosystem has the same discussion as I just mentioned in identity. Banks are going to spend something like $140 billion in 2015 focusing on digital technologies. So this trend, this need is not lost on our banking customers, and banking customers are a significant focus of Entrust Datacard. Banks are spending billions on digital technologies, and they're spending billions on branch transformation. They're spending billions on enhancing the security infrastructure of the banks themselves. This all comes down to a key goal for a bank is to create a trust relationship with a consumer. Every time you log on to your bank website, every time you do a transaction online, do you want to be thinking about that trust relationship that you have with your bank? It's a critical element of the reason why banks are in business. And a bank who is unable to maintain that trust relationship with their consumers will be out of business, and certainly not able to attract and retain their customers. So banks are taking a broader view of the ecosystem, and this is good for Entrust Datacard today. We're beginning to take a different view of what an identity is, a 360-degree view of identity, with the identity at the center of that perspective. Traditional identities will not be enough, and the technologies that have been used for traditional identities, and I don't mean just physical passports, national IDs, I also mean payment credentials, will not be enough for the future. They're not enough on their own today, and frankly, the way that we're using them creates vulnerabilities that are getting more extreme. We believe that by combining the traditional technologies and security technologies of physical credentials and the technologies of high assurance digital security, we can actually build a better ecosystem that will enable us to live our lives the way that we want to securely. Just as identities are evolving, payments are evolving, and frankly, mobile workforces are evolving, our company as well, Entrust Datacard, continues to evolve. By bringing together what is, I believe, very unique capabilities and characteristics of a leader in payment technologies and physical credentials, and Entrust, a leader in digital security, we have the ability to create a highly unique capability that you'll hear more about in the years to come. But at the end of the day, all of our goals need to be to create technology that makes all of our lives more secure and more convenient. All of the companies here at CARTES have a role in this. We each play maybe a small, maybe a large role in the security ecosystem that we're speaking about today. As an industry and as an ecosystem, we have to work together to make that security ecosystem more sound for consumers, for citizens, and for employees every day. We won't accomplish that unless we work together. So I'd ask you all to stop by our booth at some point during the show and see what we're working on, and let us give you a little more insights into the technologies we're bringing together between physical and logical, between identity and payments. We are at the center of the convergence of these trends and these technologies, and our unique capability is something that you should expect to see more from in the future. Thank you.
So stay here, Todd. I have two questions for you. The first one is, what are your primary markets you are focusing on as you develop these secure identity solutions?
Well, part of my answer actually resonates back to the very first presentation, which is, what problem are you solving? Datacard, and frankly Entrust, legacy has been a company that serves business to business. But our approach is a little different. You'll hear us talk a lot about citizens, consumers, and employees. And the reason we do that is we're trying to solve the problems of the people that we are selling to. So our bank customers, for example, are trying to solve problems for their consumers. So we first look at the problems at consumer, citizen, and employee level, and we build technology and solutions around that. But ultimately, we serve financial institutions, governments, enterprises, and frankly, the companies that serve them. And in doing so, we've got a global footprint, and we've been very successful in our two key verticals, financial and government, over the course of our history, dating back to 1969. 20 of the top 20 global banks use our technology today. A majority of the financial cards issued around the globe are issued using Datacard technology. We've participated in hundreds of passport, national ID level programs around government identity, and Entrust itself has a fantastic customer list around all of those, plus enterprise customers, where we provide security every day.
Okay, my second and final question.
Yes.
With all this discussion around the evolution of identity, security, and trust, how is Entrust Datacard poised to strategically address these changes?
Sure, thank you. Well, I think a key takeaway from my presentation this morning I'd like you to leave with is that if you look at something like 75% of the breaches that have occurred in the last 2 years have occurred due to a problem with identity, a stolen identity. Something went wrong with an identity credential, and that was the root cause of the breach. So our perspective is everything begins with secure identity. So we talk about trusted identity, secure transactions, but there's a reason why it goes in that order. Because we believe that it begins first with secure identity, and in order to solve many of the problems that we're speaking about today, we have to focus first on secure identity. As a company, because our technologies really are at the intersection of identity and payments, we believe that strategically we're well positioned to be able to take advantage of the trends in both ecosystems. And frankly, we can see a bit further because we participate deeply in both. And then frankly, one of the most strategic benefits we have as a company is we've been privately owned since 1987, and we have fantastic ownership. And as a result of being a private company, one of the fantastic strategic advantages we have is the fact that we can build a company for the long term. I've been with the company for 10 years. I've been in this space for 10 years. I think this is my 10th CARTES show. And one of the great benefits of being in a company like ours, with the ownership we have, is that we can build a company that's built to last. We can build technologies that have a longer investment cycle, and we can take bets that many public companies would not be able to. So all of these provide strategic benefit for us, both from a positioning perspective and a long-term view.
Okay, thank you very much, Todd.
Thank you.
Please stay here. Stay here. So thank you very much. Todd will stay with us. I will ask Kazem, Gilles, and Stefan to go back on stage for a final word. So let's start with the first speaker. So Kazem, a final word?
Well, it is very damageable that a lot of people did not attend the show, and there's a lot of things to do here, and CARTES has evolved significantly in the past years from being, French national to more and more international, and we continue to be here and having significant presence, and hope everybody can do the same. Thanks.
Thank you. Thanks for listening. It is great to be in this event, actually, more than ever. I totally also enjoy the convergence between payment and security. It is definitely the trend of the future. So I would like really to invite you all to our booth. Worldline is a company moving fast forward, and I think stay tuned. And for the rest, do believe that digital in payment is just a land of opportunities.
Yeah, I think very, very exciting times in front of us. As you all know, we are also still very big in payment. But on the other side, with all the other opportunities opening up, what I talked about, I think that's a great opportunity for all of us here together, as you said, to bring this technology now into other verticals. And at least in my business life, that's the first opportunity that I have the chance to work with so many different verticals at the same time. And I think we should take it as an obligation now to do it, because, as I said, it will be essential and important. But on the other side, I'm pretty sure it will be a lot of fun to do it as well. Thank you.
So the only thing I would like to add is again, reaffirming the fact that I welcome working with all three of you gentlemen as we look to the solutions that we need to build together for the future. And then finally, again, our thoughts remain with all of France as we see the events of the last few days. As a company that's headquartered in the United States, we have many, many colleagues employees, colleagues, friends here in France, and our thoughts are with you this week.
Merci beaucoup. C'est vraiment le dernier mot. Je voulais vous remercier vraiment du fond du cœur. Thank you very much for being here, really. I really appreciate, and the organization also. Please enjoy the conference. Please enjoy the show. And see you next year for TRUSTECH. Thank you very much. Bye.